Hi, this is Deanna Cosaraggio, founder of Global Tech Women. Here we are at the very end of Voices 2017. We hope that you've enjoyed this conference this week. We have one fabulous session remaining, Hearing versus Listening, Clear the Way to Objectives by Dr. Tita Graebner, who's an author, speaker, and a coach. I've known Bertita for a number of years now through the Global Women's Leadership Network is how we met. And she, to me, is always a sage philosopher. She's a very deep thinker. So I find that my conversations with her are often like brain flossing. I just feel like, wow, my mind is blown every time I listen to her. So I'm looking forward to her session on hearing versus listening, understanding the differences, and knowing how to take advantage of listening. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Graebner.
Thank you very much, Deanna. Pleasure to be here. And thank you guys for showing up for yourself. So happy for every one of you that have come here, checked in for you. Very happy to have you here. And I have a presentation that I have crafted very carefully and very carefully and held each in mind as I did this in an intimate conversation with you, who's showing up for themselves. And I'm happy you're doing that. So we're going to have a style of a sort of intimate, informal, informational, fireside chat coming to you here from this location to wherever you are. And so holding this for you as well as for those who show up later. I'm going to quite unabashedly read this as I very carefully put it together so that the hearing would have meaning and the meaning would be heard. So let's get to it, guys. We want to talk possibility within our global community. And we're talking where the tactical meets the gray areas of global technology. So when we speak, we are a part of, and we are a part before. We are a part after. We are a part that tethers us to our speaking, to our listening, and to our doing. Our mindset and biases we can choose to hold aside in a moment of listening. We can choose to listen with empathy, unclipped by expectations, spoken and unspoken. We can listen for what is there to be heard, and what is heard is what was said, and what was said is what was heard. The foundation of our work is bridging the distance between what is said and what is heard. Now, I am a generous listener and give this talk so that we can care for ourselves by listening and listening well, not simply hearing. Listening well is an excellent start toward the answers the world wants to know. What can we offer? What can we give? Our style, as I said, is an intimate fireside chat. We are talking as friends, you and I, and those that come after to view again, generously giving tidbits and pieces that can fill in blanks along the way to listening, along the way to tracking what is said and what is being heard. Our objective is clearing impediments to obtaining the riches of understanding we seek on the way to what we want. We are on the way to the objective. Listening can be a fulfillment of curiosity. Listening can be engagement with others. Listening can be transactional information exchange. Listening is a receiving skill, a receptive skill. Listening is a skill least taught, first learned, and most often in any given day. Listening is a language macro skill, As we can see here, there are 4 skills to complete communication in our native language. These 4 skills can also be called macro skills. First, we learn to listen. Then we learn to speak. Then we learn to read. Then we learn to write. They are related in 2 ways: the direction of communication, in and out; the method of communication, spoken or written. Within a language, macro skills are grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. So first we learn to listen, but we are not always taught how to do so. The question might be posed as, hear ye, what do you hear? What do I hear? What do I hear? That is the question. The rest is finding out. What do you hear? As a listener, we take into ourselves what is heard via words and visual information. We filter that, what is heard, through our personal experiences. As a listener, we can take into ourselves what is heard and seen without filters. We can simply receive, bracketing our personal experiences and knowledge set, holding those aside, sort of in a suspension elsewhere. And while we listen solely to what is said, we listen verbally, visually, and viscerally. So this is a starting place, Gaia, starting here. Gaia, as self-regulating systems, we are Gaias together on this road to listening to the riches of our world and what we can bring to it from what we hear. When we listen, we create a foundation for our clout, our voice. Here are some traditional quotes on the art of listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. The benefit of listening is twice as much as that of speaking. To listen is a means to what we're doing. Listen so that we can do. Listen, a means to, so that we can. That's said in a different way, slightly different, here by another fellow. We are given 2 ears, but only 1 mouth, because listening is twice as hard as talking. The difficulty in listening is double. Doubly hard to listen, so we're given double means to do so. Elsewhere, we hear, a stroke of the whip raises a wheel, but a stroke of the tongue breaks bones. Many have fallen by the edge of the sword, but many more have fallen by the tongue. Spoken words. The pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier than them both. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Factoids. 70% of an adult day is spent in communication. 30% of an adult day is spent in talking. 45 to 63% of an adult day is spent in listening. Factoid. Most of us listen with 25% efficiency. Listening is a conscious choice and requires our purposeful effort. When we listen, we can find upon reflection tidbits of data that are useful. In words spoken from frustration, requests, suggestions, and questions, each gives some value. In tonality and pauses, deletions, distortions, and also choice of generalization, we can hear more tidbits of useful data upon reflection. The 2-to-1 ratio is called the backbone of brevity. It is a good reminder to listen more than we speak. Brevity is key. Listen twice, speak once. Brian Pigeon speaks of brevity as the three bears continuum: too much, too little, and just right. A Goldilocks approach, just right. The sweet spot of speaking. We can begin with some traditional definitions of communication. The first step in good communication is to stop assuming the other person understands what you are saying because you understand. Do not assume. Quite possibly, listeners do not comprehend what you comprehend. Communication is transference and understanding of meaning. Transference, the core act, is redirection of meaning from to. Communication is transfer of information from one person to another person. It is a way of reaching others by transmitting ideas, facts, thoughts, feelings. A transfer of. Communication is any form of human expression, written, verbal, or even body language. Human expression en toto. A process is another definition for communication. A process by which messages of meaning are shared by senders and receivers. Communication takes place at multiple levels, interpersonally, in groups, and via mass media. Interestingly enough, this is quoted by Ohio State Sports Management. Process of messages of meanings are shared by senders and receivers. A process also of multiple levels of meaning. Communication is a process by which people send messages or exchange ideas or thoughts with one another in a verbal or non-verbal manner, a process accomplished by verbal and non-verbal means. And then dynamic. Communication is a dynamic process. Through this process, we convey a thought or a feeling to someone else. How it is received depends on a set of events, stimuli that person is exposed to. How you say what you say plays an important role in communication. A dynamic process that conveys what is received may be independent of the sender. Summing up these definitions, all our communication is a conversation. Whether in bespoken technology, or in business, or in the bedroom, we are continually between and in conversation with the other. Personal to personal, a state of betweenness, an intimate communion and exchange, a withness, a back and forth, a versifying with the other. Communication is in bespoken, in business, in the bedroom, and person to person. Foundationally knowing this, as David White says, we start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of stating, your own way of starting the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To find another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear, listening to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take. David White. So that's it, guys. We are in conversation in bespoken technology, in business, and in the bedroom. And as you go through that list of reasons why you would listen or not listen, all are appropriate to time and place. What you would be listening for in one circumstance might be different than another. But in terms of your interpersonal self, and in terms of your speaking then from that place of you with your abilities, talents, and skills that you bring to the workplace, to the global tech, it is that bending of the edges. It is that system where you want, in my opinion, where you wish to sort of take systems and sort of soften the edges, sort of put some gray into tactical technology, bespoken technology. So you customize that so it becomes the clothing you wear. A bespoken technology becomes a personalized piece. Is that not correct? Yes, in this understanding. Yeah. The application of how that belongs is in bespoken technology, it becomes more and more individual and becomes to the person it is tailored to. So the more you speak, the more you bend the edges of the technology for inclusion of people within that understanding. That's what I understand. Bespoken technology with edges that bend and customize to this one and that one, because we're not all the same, no matter what context you put us in culturally. We are in conversation. When we hear, when we listen, we know we are in conversation. We are in conversation with the other and with ourselves. The art of conversation states, a single conversation across the table with a wise man is worth a month's study of books. We might say, a single conversation across the table with a wise woman is worth a month's study of books. The conversation, get started, keep flow, improve style, no pace, no pause. But first, be a good listener. Shifting now, public speaking is the biggest fear in America. Leading a team, speaking up in a group, speaking from our own self-perspective at any time can situationally be a very great act of personal courage. This is a diagram showing what public speaking can be like. From an American perspective, and possibly other national perspectives, the fear of speaking in public stems in one way or another from these distinctions up above. Therefore, to address our fear, identification of where that fear falls is a clue to getting past inhibition and on to saying what we wish to say. Every time we communicate with another, we present ourselves, our ideas and information. If we are ambitious and want to move up the ladder of success, if we wish to have a positive impact on others, and we want recognition and rewards for our skills and talents, then when we speak, we reveal ourselves to others. Then we are known. We are on the line, subject to what others hear with their listening. Depending on the threat level we perceive at any given moment, speaking and speaking after listening in varying degrees is a very courageous act. Speaking is quite possibly a measure of the trust held by us with those in the room. By speaking, we are seen. What we tell, we tell. We tell what was heard. Our listening is revealed. Typical communication statistics. Time devoted to writing, 9 to 11% of our time. Reading, 4 to 16%. Speaking, 22% to 30%. Listening, 45 to 63. What we learn first, but are seldom taught. As measured, we spend most of our time listening and, as noted, first learned, least taught. Communication is more than verbal. Hearing and listening are not the same. Hearing is an unprotected state. Hearing is an act of resonance, an involuntary condition of unblocked oral or vibrational effect. In other words, unblocked, there is no choice about the reception of the unblocked oral or vibrational effect. Unblocked, one becomes subject to, eyes you can close to self-protect. Hearing, you must leave the room or go somewhere that you cannot hear what is coming at you through the oral and vibrational effect of unblocked oral resonance. Listening to how may each of these ways serve us? How may it serve the most, least, and when? Listening, these are some of the ways. I will speak through them. We can listen for ideas, for facts, for central theme, for form, for content, for areas of interest, for flexible note-taking, for adjustment to topic, and organizational pattern. We can tune out dry topics. We can tune out if a delivery is poor. We can seize opportunity and say, what's in it for me? Judge content, but not delivery. We can judge content and skip over delivery error. Don't judge until comprehension is complete. Each of these ways are possible. When do they serve? When do they serve most? When do they serve least? You're listening. Hold fire. Enter into argument. You can be easily distracted. You can show no energy and fake attention. Work hard, exhibit alertness, resist distractions. Stay with the speaker. Avoid distractions and concentrate. You can use heavier material as an exercise of the mind. Challenge self by anticipating thought. Mentally summarize along the way. Weigh evidence against what we know already, and resist difficult material. We can keep an open mind. All of these serve at one time or another in our listening. And listening, holding our biases and informational knowledge to a side, our cultural listening, our come from, what we know. Here are just a few more. You know that thought is faster than speech, and you can capitalize on and use that thought is faster than speech. You can daydream, flights of fancy with words spoken by slower speakers, and where their words take you. Track congruency of delivery between tone and voice as additional information given. And you can take the contemporary parlance of WTF, what's the face? What's the face? The words don't match the tone, the words don't match the expression, the words don't match the attitudinal delivery. What's the face? That can also be information in listening. So why might we choose to listen or not to listen? Listening is hard work. Listening is competition. Listening is a rush for action. Listening is with a lack of training. We listen with a lack of training. Consider these factoids. Our average speaking rate is about 125 to 175 words a minute. We can hear up to 450 words a minute. The difference between our speaking speed and our hearing rate allows 75% of our mind to wander as unoccupied between words per minute and spoken and the hearing ability to hear how many words per minute, 450. Here we can discover and open to the many gifts of a relationship between hearing and listening. Having heard 125 words a minute, a word within those words may spark a thought in us. We have 75% for our mind to entertain that or to hold in reserve, to go back to and note, to explore, not to miss the piece in between. Consider, we have 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts per day, person specific. We have between 35 and 48 thoughts per minute, person specific. This steady flow of thinking is thick with filters between our thoughts, our feelings, and between our head and our heart. Consider, at least 80% of a manager's waking hours are spent in verbal communication. Communication is all about establishing good relationships. The presence of good interpersonal relationships between managers and subordinates was 3 times more powerful in predicting profitability in 40 major corporations over a 5-year period than the next 4 most powerful variables: market share, capital intensity, firm size, and sales growth rate combined. Effective communication. Women converse to build rapport and to receive empathy, not solutions. Emphasize politeness, are more likely to compliment, and are conciliatory. Men converse to preserve an independent status by displaying knowledge and skill. They wish to work out problems on an individualized basis and are more directive during conversation. They call attention to their accomplishments, tend to dominate discussion during meetings, and are more intimidating. These may be subject to person. Do not know how they fit in your personal scheme, but I think they can be flipped. The words read for men and the ones read for women. But those are reasons to converse, and you might be identifying those in the moment of conversing or reflecting and saying, that and that and that. Levels of listening. The non-listener doesn't intend to listen to you, doesn't hear, doesn't try to pay attention. The non-listener wants to do the talking, constantly interrupts and attempts to control what is the last word. The non-listener offers blank stares, may exhibit nervous mannerisms while we're speaking, may fake attention during our conversation. When they respond correctly or incorrectly, appropriately or inappropriately, we are clear that they are listening or they are not. The marginal listener, here's what is said, but what we say is not grasped. Listen solely for basic meaning of the words spoken, but takes no notice of body language, voice tone, or other subtle communications. A low context listener thinks about what they want to say next and gives the impression that what you are saying is incomprehensible to them. Confusion and mistakes can result. What's the face? Incomprehensible. The evaluative listener tries to hear what we say and to comprehend our word meanings, because messages from vocal intonation, body language, or facial expressions is not understood clearly, nor the intent or meaning behind our words. These important components of what we are trying to communicate are missed by that listener. Active listeners listen without judgment while we speak, want to understand what we are saying to them and why we are speaking. Our view is respected. High content, low content communication. These designations refer to the value cultures place on direct and indirect communication. This continuum refers to how much a speaker relies on words or other ways to convey meaning other than by words. There are inherent differences between cultures. Edward Hall states in The Silent Language that individuals face more sensory cues than can be processed in the moment. Statistics on listening do not allow for processing time. That has not been quantified. How long does it take to quantify or to process many cues from the listening environment that are received with all the levels of meaning and information, especially culturally consistent with high or low context? Each culture supplies their members with specific filters that allow them solely to focus on what that society deems important. What we can choose to bracket when we listen, that is what we do at this point. Country, corporate, individual, societal. We can choose to bracket that when we listen. Hold that somewhere and hear what is said. Every individual uses both high and low context communication. No individual nor culture excludes one over the other. Both are employed. However, some individuals and cultures have come to favor high context over low context, or vice versa when speaking and listening. Totally at choice around that, some are. Here is a cultural continuum of how that is in different countries, given by International Business Chart. High context culture. Most of the information is either in the physical context or initialized in the person. That's what Hall says. It's broken into 6 areas since he began his work of understanding, and I'll relate each one. The high context culture, first one is knowledge. Knowledge is situational and relational. Less is verbally explicit or written or formally expressed. More internalized understandings of what is communicated, like in-jokes, meaning you're part of, and everyone knows it because you got the joke and you carry that with you. Only you and your group knows that joke. It's often used in long-term and well-established relationships. Decisions and activities focus around personal face-to-face communication, often around a central authoritative figure. Strong awareness of who is accepted, belongs, versus outsiders. High context. Association. Relationships depend on trust, build up slowly, and are stable. Productivity depends on relationships and group process. Identity is rooted in groups, family, culture, work. And social structure is authoritative and centralized. Characteristic of interaction. Interaction is nonverbal, and the nonverbal elements such as voice tone, gesture, facial expression, and eye movement are significant. Verbal messages are indirect, and communication is an art form or a way of engaging someone. Disagreement is personalized, and a person is sensitive to conflict expressed in someone else's nonverbal communication. Conflict either must be solved before work can progress, or in high context cultures, it must be avoided. Territoriality, space is communal. People stand close to each other and share the same space. So when setting the room for a meeting or a conference or a conversation in real time in its physical environment, communal space is important for high context. There needs to be common space and places for people to cluster in that grouping of social context. Temporality, Everything has its own time, and time is not easily scheduled. Change is slow, and time is a process that belongs to others and to nature. High context: Chinese, highest; African, Arab, Greek, Mexican, Spanish. Italian begins to go the other direction towards low context. French, English, American, Scandinavian, and German, low context. High context: good continuum to hold in mind, methinks. Temporality: everything has its own time, and time is not easily scheduled. Change is slow, and time is a process that belongs to others and to nature. Multiple sources of information are used in a high context learning process. Thinking is deductive and proceeds from general to specific. Learning occurs by first observing others as they model or demonstrate, and then they practice. Groups are preferred for learning and problem solving. Accuracy is valued. How well something is learned is important. So that's the 6 breaks through Chinese to about Spanish in the high context cultures. Low context culture: the mass of information is vested in the explicit code. The medium is the message. The message is low context. And here we're moving from Italian that direction. More attention is paid to the literal meanings of words rather than the context surrounding them for meaning. For the meaning that's to be conveyed. Category 1 around knowledge. Knowledge is public, external, accessible, and rule-oriented. Knowledge is transferable. Decisions and activities focus around what needs to be done and division of responsibilities. Task-centered. Communication durations are shorter. It's on the order of get her done and who's going to do it. Association. Relationships begin and end quickly. Many people can be inside our circle. The boundary is not clear. Stuff is done following procedures and paying attention to the goal. My identity is rooted in myself and my accomplishments. Low context, cultural continuum. Social structure is decentralized. To the opposite side, centralized. Responsibility is also decentralized, not concentrated at a hierarchical top. On the interaction dimension of low context cultures, communication is a way to exchange information, ideas, and opinions. The verbal message is direct. We spell things out exactly. My message is carried more by words than by non-verbal means. Disagreement is depersonalized, reified, depersonalized, detached. We withdraw from conflict with another and focus on getting stuff done. Our focus is on rational solutions, not personal ones. An individual can be explicit about another person's bothersome behavior. Speaking of territoriality and setting the room, space is compartmentalized. Privacy is important, so people stand farther apart. Places to conclave, places to be separate and apart, places for small group, breakout groups, and sessions. Temporality, events and tasks are scheduled and to be done at particular times. A change is fast And time is a commodity to be spent or saved. One's time is one's own. So when you pass by someone in the hallway, hurriedly, and perhaps bump them by error, you may want to put that minute forward into when you might need that minute at the end of time, when you did not stop to say, oh, excuse me, hi, and how are you? And have a conversation. You might want to put that minute into when you might need it down the road. Very important to know, I think. Learning, one source of information, is used to develop knowledge. Thinking proceeds from specific to general, inductive. Learning occurs by following the explicit directions and explanations of others. Individual orientation is preferred for learning and problem solving. Speed is valued. Efficiency is learned and is important. That is all for now, guys. We are self-regulating systems in a world that wants to know what we possess to give, and we want to tell them. This informational fireside chat is in a late afternoon here on this lovely 10th day of March, and we want to tell them what we have to give. This informational fireside chat offers some of the pieces for our listening abilities, from which we speak, from which we learn, from which we move forward and tell that we have heard what was said. So, guys, we talk possibility within our global community. We are talking the tactical meets the gray areas in global technology. When we speak, we are a part before and we are a part after. We are a part of what tells us. High context, low context, learning, listening first, what kind of listener, what we listen for, how we can choose to listen, how we can take our biases, which are ours and okay in my humble opinion. We can have our points of view. We can have our observational position. We can say, okay, holding that aside, I'm going to hear what this person is saying to me. And then we speak of the tidbits and bits and pieces here and there that give us something we didn't have before because we listened, set our stuff aside, heard what was said, and were able to take that in as a part that we can learn from and be in the world with that then piece as part of us. When we speak, we are a part of a before, and we are a part of an after. We are a part of what tethers us. High context, low context, familial history, work history, corporate. We are a part of what tethers us. We are like butterflies spinning the tactical with the gray. This is how it is here. Learning, we connect. Women leaders, connect. Learning, we connect. Connect to yourself. We spiral and reel, round and round, spinning and wrapping the thread, emitting from our resonant listening. We potentiate. Women leaders, we follow what our heart dots here and connect. Women leaders, we lead. We leap into the breach, threading disconnection to connection. Women, these are the times of easing into what is next. Women leaders, connect. Let our larval listening lead us as we leap into our leadership. Women leaders, we learn, we connect, we lead from continual formation and reformation. Women, lead from your self-connection. Guys, brilliant day, so happy to be with you. If there are any questions anyone would like to ask, I'm happy to explore them with you either online or later. This slideshow presentation will be available online for review, and we can speak of it further if you wish. So happy to speak to any and all of you as you come on and say, here we are. Thank you so much for your presence here. There, thank you. Thank you for being here for yourself, guys, for showing up and saying, hey, I can do some good listening, and I can just keep moving forward with hearing, listening, hear what is heard. Put all of your stuff over there, somewhere else. Hold it in abeyance, if I may use that lovely word, which I like. Put that up over there while you hear what is said. And by your questions, by your listening, you tell what you've heard. So when you speak up in an office situation, before a boss, in a group, in a conversation within the office space, you are showing yourself to say what you heard. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. I mean, not judging that at all. It says you heard what you've heard. And then that conversation can flow because you ask questions around what's spoken. By listening well, listening clearly, putting your stuff aside, you can hear what the other has to say.
We are all contemplating what you have presented to us and posted in the chat window. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. I mentioned listening as a skill in my talk this morning. As often we are told to improve our communication skills, it is focused on the speaking, presenting part. And sometimes we measure way too much our ability to speak and not our ability to listen.
Yes, true. And what you hear is gold. What you hear is treasure. You say, okay, yes. The riches of the relationship of what you heard that you did not know.
Thank you very much for a great session.
Thank you.
And this concludes Voices 2017. We will see you next time. Take care.